Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity of presenting my work that we are doing here in West Africa about using a network approach to study livestock mobility in the region of West Africa. Before going on, I would like first of all to thank our collaborator. Without them, we couldn't do any of the work. In particular, thanking the ONARDEL, the Veterinarian Services of Mauritania, and the Senegalese counterpart, but also the ISRA, the Institut Sénégalais de Recherche Agricole, that allowed me to do this kind of work. Before going on, I would like to introduce some of the terminology that I'm going to use in the next slides. First of all, let's start with the definition of network. A network is a representation of a system in terms of nodes and links. In our case, nodes will represent villages, farm, or market, and a link will exist between two nodes if there is a movement between the two points. Like in this case, for example, we can think A is Dakar and E is Nouakchott, and there is a movement on animal between the two, but there is no direct connection between these two nodes B and F or B and C. Now, we indicate with weight the number of animals that are moved between an origin and destination over a certain link. After we can then introduce some characteristic and nodes point that I'm going to use in the next slides. And the first one is the in and out degree, corresponding to the number of connection reaching a point or from a node to another. Like in this case, we have that the node A has 3 incoming links, so is 3 in degree, and has 1 outgoing link, so as house degree 1. If we consider instead of the simple connection also the animals that are moved, we can talk about in and out weight. The second, the third measure that I'm going to use is a measure of centrality that measures the importance of a certain node in a network, and it's called betweenness. This indicates the number of paths passing through a certain node. In this case, again, the node A is the node with highest betweenness, because without these nodes B, C, and D cannot be connected to the other side of the network. Unfortunately, networks in reality are much more complicated, and also their dynamics depends strongly on external factors that we cannot easily manage. Particularly important when we are going to talk about mobility in West Africa. There are several factors influencing the dynamics of the network. To start from climate condition, West Africa encompasses the hyper-arid and arid area of Africa, so in particular Mauritania and Senegal, where I'm focusing my research, till the coastal area where vegetation grows for a longer period during the year. Because of the harsh climate condition, animals are kept moved looking for better graze and water sources. And in certain period of the year, we assist to the transhumance movement, where animals are moved along for long journey, looking for better graze, mostly in the coastal area. During this movement, herders and farmers interact, sometimes in a friendly way, exchanging manure for grazing or for work, or in a friendly way. However, besides transhumance, another important point is trade, commercial movement. Animals are sold to nearest market and then moved to collection market, bigger market, and then finally reach bigger consumption market like city. These could happen routinely, but also trade particular increase in around festivity like Tabaski, that is a religious festivity celebrating the Isaac sacrifice by Abraham. And in this case, in particular for Mauritania and Senegal, almost 1 million of sheep are killed in a short period of time. Another important point is the way of transportation. Animals are transported in many different, livestock are transported in many different ways, by foot most of the time, but also by truck or by car, as you can see in this case. And this, all of this will bring me to one important point, is that in West Africa, there isn't any centralized system for tracking animal movement, those identify animal movement. Fortunately, in some cases, like Mauritania and Senegal, some certificate system have been developed at the national level. Herders moving from one village to another or from one village to a market pass to the closest veterinarian service and to declare the number of animals that they are moving, the species, but also where they are going or where they are going. They fill this kind of forms, and routinely these forms are collected by the veterinarian services. Now, using this information, we have been able to reconstruct the mobility network in Senegal and Mauritania. These two maps, the points represent all the villages that have been included in that we have found in the document analysis. Now we see that in the case of Senegal, there are much, you can check on this summary table, there are a lot more locality than in Mauritania, and also much more links, much more connection between the locality than Mauritania. However, in terms of volume, we see that there is a huge gap between the animal that have been recorded in Mauritania and the animal that have been recorded in Senegal. Moreover, without going too much into detail, we found that most of the movement concerned small ruminants, then goat and cheese, and in the case of Mauritania, 20% of the animals are sold abroad, and only less than 20% of the movements are done using trucks. While in Senegal, there is almost the opposite. Few animals are used for exportation, for export, and the majority of the movement is done using trucks or cars. Now, this is a representation of the network. As you can see, as I told you, it's quite difficult to see any pattern like this. We can see maybe here, we can see in Mauritania, there is this axis toward the west area to non-choked. And also we can see this other axis, north-south, that goes from the border with Morocco till Guinea. For Senegal, the image is much more confused. Moreover, we should check before going on that networks change depending on the species and depending on the mode of transportation used by the herders. Like, for example, this is the fraction of common links or links shared by small ruminant cattle. But look, if we are going to consider the fraction of movements done by common by foot and truck, the fraction is really low. Now, we can use some measure to classify our network. In particular, we use the degree distribution. We consider how many, the degree of each node, and we see how they are repartited according to different values. Or the weight, the same thing. We take the weight of the links and we say hi, and we check, we distribute in bins and see how they are distributed. We found that in this case, both the degree and the weight distribution show a power law distribution. That means that a few nodes or few nodes have a lot of connections, and a lot of nodes have a few connections, one or two. Or in the case of links weight, we have that there are few links, that where most of the animal pass by, and a lot of links where a small volume of animals are exchanged. This can help us to identify, for example, which are the hubs of the network, the most important, the most connected nodes, but also what are the links most likely to pass, to animal pass, and also together the disease. Now, these are, for example, representation of, I put here what are the nodes with highest incoming weight, as I told you, the number of animals going toward a certain point, or outgoing weight, the number of animals leaving a certain certain area, and then the betweenness, that is the centrality, the importance of the node. Now we see, like for example, that Pekin, Dakar is the most consumption point. This is quite, and also Nouakchott for Mauritania. This is quite natural because this is where most of the population concentrate. However, the canal here and KD here in Senegal, they are the in Mauritania, sorry, are the places where there is highest outgoing weight. So these are the points where animals are living, spreading most likely. The most central point are then in Senegal are then located in the south, and these are the gates for movement, international movement towards other countries. Now, this was a static representation. However, the network is changing in time a lot. In this case, we consider the volume by month for the two countries, and we see that in the case of Mauritania, we have two peaks for small ruminants, one between April and June, and one around August, around September, October. Moreover, we notice that for cattle in this case, the movement is concentrated in the first part of the year and then disappearing in the second part of the year. A similar peak we found here for Senegal. Moreover, we noticed that in the first part in Mauritania, in the first part of the year, most of the animals are moved on foot, and the second part of the year, instead, for the second peak, the majority is moved to using truck. This is a clear example of the Tabaski effect. So in a few period of time, animals, in particular small ruminants, should be sent to market in a very short amount of time. Now, Tabaski is affecting the network in different ways, not only in terms of the volume of animal exchanging, but also in terms of how network is composed and distributed. Some links disappear, some new links appear, and also market and location can change their importance. So we use some algorithm to detect when this network, the dynamics of the network is changing, and to check if what we see is not just two random noise. And we see exactly this partition of the year in two parts. The first part going from January till July, August, and the second part including the last 4 months. Now, just to have an idea of what's going on, this is what happened in Senegal. The Tabaski is affecting not only how network is distributed, but also the function of the network itself. Like, for example, here we classify the links depending on the frequency that we have seen along the year. And we have some occasional networks that appear just 1 or 2 months, and links appear for just 1 and 2 months, and some backbone network that are instead always present through all the network. And then they have something between 3 and 6 months, intermediate, and 6 to 12 months. Now, not only we notice that the occasional network appear only when Tabaski is occurring, but also the effect of Tabaski is changing the function of the network. Like we can see here in the CN network, at the beginning, in the first part of the year, this network is used for connecting farm. In the second part of the year, most of the movement are towards market, and truck, the use of truck is increasing. Let's go further. Let's try to understand what is the risk of the transmission of a disease on the network. To do this, we consider we have to think that also for network we can define a sort of R naught that depends on the structure of the network. Here, beta is the transmissibility, the probability that a disease can pass from one animal to another one, and here this is the average value of the product of the in degree and out degree over the in degree. For a disease to spread, this quantity should be bigger than 1. We define the epidemic threshold as the minimal value of this transmissibility beta for having R naught to be equal 1. And so this depends only on the structural part of the network. Here we see that the network is changing over the time in terms of links and volume exchange. What we also wanted to wanted to understand what is the role of the occasional links, those links that appear just once and then disappear. And we see that in Senegal, in particular in March, there is a huge effect on the of the occasional links. In this case, the blue line corresponded to the epidemic threshold evaluated on the network without the occasional links, and the red one indicates instead all the networks, or including the occasional one. Now, the lowest is the value of the epidemic threshold, the highest is the probability of a disease to be transmitted from one node to another one, and then through all the networks. And we see that there is a huge gap here, then indicating that these occasional links can have an important role, can also affect the spread of the disease during the year. We see also that in this case the epidemic threshold is really low and is really low along the year, although for the rest of the year there is no huge impact of the occasional networks over the epidemic threshold. In case, or the case of the Mauritania is more stable in a certain way. The epidemic is always low. The epidemic threshold is always low. There is a spike here, and also a gap between September and October, the Tabaski period. But we can also locate what are the most important, in a certain way, in the diffusion process location, in this case, department. And to do this, we follow a procedure developed by Volkova that we estimated the invasion threshold, the R naught, as we have seen before. Then we select a node, we remove the node, we estimate the invasion threshold, and we estimate in particular the variation between the two. The higher is this variation, the more is important this node in the diffusion. And we found that in this case, in Senegal, Ferlo in the north and the area of Vélingara are the more important points in terms of diffusion. This is diffusion. While in south, in Mauritania, there are this area at the border with Mali and Senegal that are the most important one for the diffusion of the disease. Finally, we also check in this case what happens if we consider or not the occasional links. And while for Mauritania, so we take the same network, we estimate the invasion threshold with all the links, then we repeat the procedure above, and then we consider instead the network without occasional links. We estimate R naught, and we repeated the same procedure. Now, what we found is that in the case in the case of Senegal, Vélingara becomes an important point. This means that almost 1/3 of the animals are traded through occasional links passing through Vélingara. So what happens is that because of these occasional links, with this huge amount of animals that are moved on these occasional links, we have an increase on the spread of the disease, on the risk of spread of the disease. So it could be interesting for veterinarian services control the area of Vélingara, in particular in period where there are this occasional link that appears once or twice a year, and vaccinate animals in this area. So This is the end. So everything of this should be confirmed by models for the specific disease, but this is the end. I hope that I convey the idea that the livestock mobility in West Africa is quite a complex phenomenon. From the few data available, we have been able to understand the variation according the species and transportation, and the variation along the year, and the importance of such social events in the spread of the disease. Thank you.